All right. Welcome to our interview with Alternatives to Calling the Police During Mental Health Crises, also known as ACP. It is a grassroots project to address the issues of state violence on MAD, psychiatrically disabled, and neurodivergent community members, and imagine a world where widespread over-policing, surveillance, and mass incarceration are replaced with equitable investment, community care, and restorative in justice. Euree Kim, did I say your name right?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Is an interdisciplinary artist, activist, and researcher. Euree's works seek to navigate the complicated realities of how disabilities are produced, perceived, and represented in the face of critical socio-political issues. Euree is a co-founder of Project ACP, a grassroots initiative to address state violence against people with disabilities, and recently started a new project on militarism, disability experience, and remembrance. Euree earned their BFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and their Master of Public Policy with Human Rights concentration from Adler University. Their writings have been published or shared at Truth Out, AK Press, Riksha Magazine, and more.
Thank you.
Before we start the questions, just want to say thank you one more time. We really appreciate you being here. Thank you. And for the first question, we were wondering if you could briefly just describe the main purpose of Alternatives to Calling the Police during mental health crises.
Oh, sure. So ACP, we use art and media to document and uplift the critical political instance, community actions, and people's stories as a way of message delivery, witnessing, healing, environment, and solidarity. So we are inspired by disability and transformative justice movement. We center the lived experiences and needs of the directly impacted communities. We acknowledge that disability is both a cause and consequence of violence, trauma, and poverty. And abolition is necessary to end the cycle of harm and move toward the collective healing. So our project is voluntary. We respect the autonomy of participating communities and collaborators in making decisions for themselves and their communities. We do not provide a solution or conclusion for them because each community has their own unique needs, cultural values, and backgrounds. And this is also because we value the process, being in a collaborative a relationship. We believe that people are all in a different journeys of learning and unlearning. And we are making a space for the conversations, connections, and also a sharing of resources. Thank you. That's a brief description of our project.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you so much. And so how did your organization get started in abolitionist work in Chicago? And also, what is unique about abolitionist and disability justice work in Chicago as opposed to in other cities elsewhere?
So the ACP was started back in 2017 at the Macachina Cafe, which is now closed. It wasn't a person, a neighborhood, and it was organized by a group of artists and self-advocates, organizers, and mental health professionals who were directly or indirectly affected by state violence and incarceration. The very first workshop was to center the stories and the needs of the people who were impacted, as well as to raise the awareness and brainstorm alternatives, which was based on a peer support and mutual aid. And this a small community event was later transformed and evolved into the grassroots multimedia project, so that we can continue the conversations, deepen the understandings, and further contemporary to like complicate to like a narratives. So that like the just like a one story is not dominating the whole. But also like we hope to make spaces where like the different like the stories and perspectives and viewpoints. Um, and regarding Chicago, Chicago has a history of like instituting a law that criminalize the people with disabilities in like public spaces. There's a group called the Ugly Law. If you have heard of it, Chicago has this like a law to kind of arrest and penalize the people.
During the conversation.
No worries. Can you just restart? You were talking about Chicago being different from other cities in terms of abolition and disability justice. If you could just restart that answer, I'm sorry, that would be great.
Yeah. Sometimes my computer overheats and they shut down, and I hope maybe this time was not very lucky. I again separately apologize for the inconvenience and technology. Yeah. Um. So the Chicago like a they had like a the laws that criminalize like people with disabilities in public spaces, which is also where you can find from the book called the Aubrey Laws, how they actually like, instituted law to criminalize arrest and penalize people just for like existing in public spaces. And also there has been history of the people like institutionalization in Chicago as well, um, and how it kind of like get connected with the different like history of the like policing in the Black and Brown communities, um, like where you can find from the history of the Homeland Square, which is also called as a, like a Black site, and how the people who were tortured and arrested and incarcerated gain disabilities and mental illness like over the time. Like what so and there's like the organization called the Chicago Torture Justice Center who will support like the healing and also the justice and reparations for the people who are impacted by such history. And so there have been a lot of like grass reports and justice. Um, we actually created the zine called the Accept Us, Not Kill Us, to document the history of the disability justice and struggles for the abolition from the 2012 to 2018. We interviewed and conversed with the different disabled community members and organizers of color, what they think about the justice and care being in their communities. And also we included like what are the political wisdom they found very like an important to themselves and their communities. And you can check it out. It's like a free on the issue.
Thank you. For the next question, we're hoping if you have a moment in which you could think of, if you could describe a moment in which your work with ACP transformed your own perspective or even reinforced your understanding of the necessity of abolitionist mental health crisis responding.
Oh, sure. There are so many. Just like I am so humble. I learned so much from the people, and people have been so like generous about like a challenging and my perspectives and sharing like their own. I remember my friend like a comrade and collaborator shared this during a meeting. Like we should use the word support rather than intervention in relation to the crisis, because it can demean and demonize people with disabilities and their like lived experiences as like a problem, um, rather than like thinking of them as like a community member who needs like a support. And I was very shocked because this person he um, wasn't really much aware about like disability justice, but he really like invested his time to kind of like educate himself and understand the realities and needs of the people with disabilities. Um, what are the like perception people might be facing in relation to the language? Um, yeah, it was like one of the learning moments, but there are like a really many more. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And you've spoken a little bit to this already, but could you further describe how Project ACP specifically bridges the gap between abolitionist and disability justice work?
Um, I feel very humbled I get to answer the second question because I'm still like learning. I especially learn a lot from working with the national like disability justice and population like organizers and activists and practitioners in 2020. Yeah, but and we also like growing like we're only like a 5 years old. But one thing we really wanted to kind of like address with this project is how the mm, institutionalization and medical industrial complex is also part of the larger policing and carceral like the system. This is something we have been talking since like 2018, which was not very it's not like a popular, but it was not like a widely discussed at the time. But we kind of like um didn't give up, but still kind of like tried making a spaces and invited people to engage in conversations. And um, now we are kind of like able to kind of shift like some of the ideas and understandings about those issues a little bit, which I'm feeling very like grateful. Now more people are like aware about it and talking about it. And would like to learn like what they can do to challenge those as well. Um, and more people are coming into the movement, which is very great. Um, hmm, because these systems are like connected together, like it's just very like heavily like a profit driven rather than like promoting like an body autonomy or interdependent like a life of every being. Yeah. And also what we wanted to really like address was like in how like the complexity of the disabilities in relation to the like policing and incarceration. It's not just how the disabilities are being like criminalized as being like abnormal and unfit and non-desirable, but also how people are gaining disabilities through going through the prison and carceral like systems, um, and also how like certain communities are being like perceived as like having like a disabilities. I remember like reading about how um, Black and Latin students are how like redirected to the special education programs, um, even though they don't necessarily have to like mm, the developmental the, disabilities. Um, yeah, So many of this kind of like a criteria is like who are like grading this, and also like who have been more like subject to this like criteria. There's also like recently the changes in the like the DSM as well about the trauma, and many organizations like a Project Meds and the IDHA has been sharing a concern about it too. Yeah. So we are like continue to like work to really kind of like investigate the, like disabilities, how it's been kind of like interacting with the criminal justice systems, and also how people like are gaining the disabilities or like perceived as having a disabilities. Mm. We hope to kind of like also like learn and relearn by working with the people and connecting.
Thank you. You've spoken so much about how like different ways that this change can happen, but if there's one thing that you wish that society in general, components of the police specifically know about abolition centered in disability justice, what would that one thing be?
Mm. Another world is possible. Whenever we as ACP like talk about the obligations and alternatives to policing, and people will come and ask us like what if, and they share like a different kind of like a situation, like um what if like this situation is happening, and they're calling police is like being like necessary, um but then we also kind of like say that like we're all kind of like a private kind of like systems and responsible in making changes like together, because as I already like stated, we are interdependent with each other in making changes and surviving this war, this apocalypse, and we really like need each other. Um, I know it's like a very like easy to be like a drown to like relying on the like policing and like a community systems, but it's really like important to like continue to practice like a hope and hold a, like a faith in like a communities, um, even in very like desperate like situations. Um, I have encountered many difficult and like a very like complicated like a situation in relation to like a crisis. Um, Sometimes the violence and harm is being like an involved, um, but so it's like important to like the mm, it's like so kind of remember ourselves like what is the word we kind of hope to like create, and um, how can we give the chances for people for change and provide like resources, um, so they can kind of like get engaged in this like the healing and transformative process rather than forcing them to be um, in it, um, and because it's important that like we are making and providing a support, but at the same time we are not forcing people to go towards the thing we are believing as the healing, um, or the like right way. This is also kind of like how we explain the de-escalation like a process. It happens like one step at a time. It doesn't have like the change doesn't happen like one big step, but one like small steps to get together. And we are not de-escalating the person, but we are providing a support, so that the person can de-escalate themselves. Um, and um, So that's the message we hope to share with the people. Um, and
Yeah, thank you so much. And you started anticipating our final question, which is, what are some resources for people who are looking to becoming more informed about disability justice focused abolition? Where should we turn to? Who should we be learning from?
oh my gosh, there are so many. like, um, mm, there's also a lot of like resources on the Abolition and Disability Justice Coalitions, the resource page as well. But just to name like a few, the national ones, I know you may already know the Project Mass. There's also Fireweek Collective, um, who provide like a really useful like a workshops on like healing justice, and building relationships, and then like a care work. Um, there's I also learned about the IDHA, which is based in New York City. Um, I forgot like what the IDHA them I was referring to, but they're really awesome. Um, mm, and there's also like organization called the Interrupting Criminalization, started by the Maria Kaba and Andrea Ricci. They provide like the really also great range of like resources. I was also very moved by the report on the reproductive justice and how it connects with the like, disparate communities. Um, and there's also organization called the Transgender Law Center. Um, I am learning a lot from them on how they do the work. Um, and, and there's also an organization called the Just Practice. They do- no, like they provide like workshops on the restorative justice, and also like a disability justice, like workshops as well about the self harm and um, navigating like relationships. Um, um, yeah, and there's like a many more. You can like find from there like a resource page too. Um, and like more like locally there have been really like an amazing like disability justice rituals, groups organized by like peers like the Carrie Kaufman, Rise, and many more. And um, I also like admire the works by the Chicago Future Justice Center. They have been intentionally integrating disability justice into their like programming, and which I really appreciate. Um, and there's also other. I do know that there are several other like abolitionist groups who are more like moving towards like implementing disability justice, and I cannot remember the names at the time. You know, um, I'm really grateful for their works too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all of those resources and places to get started on doing learning about this kind of work. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with us that you haven't already said or that we haven't asked you about Project ACP?
Oh, um, our new scene is forthcoming. It's called the Visual Aid ACP. It is like a our like a culmination of like the work since like the 2017 about the like the peer support, um, how to like do the peer support in a crisis situations. And it's basically like collection of all by like the resources we learn from the people, all their like experiences and conversations with communities. And we have been working with the multiple mature groups in Chicago's to make the spaces for like a learning and conversation since last year. And we're kind of like working on it, like compiling all the like resources, and hopefully the thing may be published later this year or early like the next year. Um, we're still in a pandemic. We never know how things may go, and oh, oh, and this like a project is I guess sponsored by the Third Wave Fund and Illinois Humanities. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much again for all the questions. Yeah. You know, sometimes at some point maybe I overspoke. I like to talk about the project.
No,
Do you
that's great.
have any other like questions for clarifications?
I think we're good. Sorry, I interrupted you, Donnie. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say thank you very much for joining us today.
Yay, thank you so much. And I'm very sorry for the technical difficulty.
It's all good. We understand that it happens. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording now.